Hello and welcome to IndieSider. This week I'm playing Leadlight Gamma, a text adventure by Mr. Wade Clarke, released earlier this year in 2015 and available on itch.io for $5. Now, interactive fiction or text adventures are a genre of games that you may have considered obsolete as of the 1980s, but it is not. In fact, there is an active community of enthusiasts around text adventures. For those who don't know or don't remember, text adventures are games that are primarily text. This game is Leadlight Gamma, is a survival horror game. I'm going to start a new game in tutorial mode. So this walks you through the setup for the game and how to play. So your name is Belinda Nettle. You are 15 years old and studying in the 10th grade as a boarding student at Linville Girls High School, west of the Blue Mountains in Australia, which is Wade Clarke's hometown, coincidentally, or at least his home country. Sending you to an expensive boarding school was your mother's way of ridding herself of you while still feeling okay about it. Your stepfather has never been interested in you, and you barely remember your real father. Life seems gloomy and unremarkable. You have few friends at this school. You remember being kind and curious as a child, but now you often feel dark. So you have these statistics: hardiness of 25, agility of 45, and charisma of 15. One day on August 12th, 2010, you wake up and everything feels different. It is night. You are in the student library. A girl from your year, Charlotte Jeff, sits across from you in wide-eyed repose. She is pale and utterly still. As minutes continue to pass, it dawns on you that she is dead. You face Charlotte over the desk upon which you fell asleep. Now this is the tutorial mode, so it's going to help me learn how to play. And the way you play with a text adventure is by inputting into the parser two-word commands, usually a verb and a noun, like go north, look bottle, get axe, attack corpse. So here it's going to suggest that we look. So let's type look, and it repeats the description of the room. Great. Now we can look at specific things. So let's do examine corpse. You can see that the tutorial is listed in blue, the description is in black, and my commands are in green. There is a ragged wound in her side. Blood has formed a dark ring around her on the floor. Her skin is ice cold. Ugh. Now as a shortcut, I can type X instead of examine, because I'm going to be doing a lot of things here. So let's X iPod. Okay, it's playing something right now. Let's get iPod, and now we can find out what's in our inventory. And I'm carrying my winter uniform, my school shoes, my Belinda necklace, my jeweled hairpin, and an iPod. Great. We can look at those later, but for now, the tutorial is only going to let me follow its commands while I get the hang of things. A few more quick things I should point out. So up here, we have our scores, our statistics: hardiness 25. That will go down as I get attacked. My agility and my weapons, how many moves I've made, and this is the Minimap, or the auto map. I can make it bigger. I can make it smaller. I can click on rooms to see what they are. Linville Student Library. Great. Now let's type L for look again. And it says the iPod isn't mentioned in the room anymore because I took it. It's in my inventory. Now it's time to learn how to move around. We can go north, south, east, or west. Let's go west to the toilet. Just going to type W. And see the map expanded here. I'm going to zoom in on that. So now there are two rooms, and it shows me how they connect. The red line is where I am now, and then there's the gray line, which is where I was. So now there are other things in this room. You are in the toilet of the library. The walls are pale pink. The air is stale. A malfunctioning fluorescent light flickers woundedly overhead. I love the evocative descriptions that Wade wrote for this survival horror game. There's a bricked up window where there were no bricks before, so that suggests you an influence similar to Silent Hill, which is an influence for this game, as is the movie Black Swan. Someone has written something on the back of the toilet. Let's find out what that is. Let's examine the writing. X writing. Whoops, that's not it. Oh, okay, let's try read writing. Scrawled in crimson, it says blame Belinda. Great, I got +1 points. So now I have 1 point out of 80. You can beat the game without solving every mystery, but if you want to be a completionist, you got to get all 80 secret points. I can also find out what my score is by typing score, although it was just up there, I just zoomed in on you. And complete Leadlight 1 to unlock extra help. Well, if I finished it once, would I really need the extra help? However, the game does come with a PDF of frequently asked questions, which are very helpful because it gives you, are you stuck on this? And then it gives you a clue, and you have to decipher the clue using a cheat sheet that it gives you, a lookup table, basically. That way, you can find out what it is offering help on without immediately being given the answer. So let's look again. and etc. So this game was originally written for the Apple II computer, which was manufactured by Apple from 1977 to 1993 and is incompatible with the Macintosh. Leadlight, as it was called, came out for the Apple II in 2010 and won several awards, including in the Interactive Fiction competition, which is held every year. It is now 5 years later, and Wade has ported this game, or actually rewritten it, from the original Eamon system to Inform. I interviewed Wade 5 years ago about the original version of this game, and this interview for IndieSider is going to focus on the new version of the game. Now let me get back to the main menu for a moment. It's not going to let me do that, I think. So let me reopen the game. And it's going back to the menu, because I just want to show you a few of the other features that are here. So there is an accessibility mode. So anytime there are graphics, like a minimap or even that opening splash screen, it will replace it with descriptive text. So if you use a screen reader, that is very handy. I'm going to turn that back off now. There's also an image gallery. And again, this is all text-based, which I love. There are no pull-down menus. So let's look at, for example, croquet mallet killing. Okay, that's rather violent. Wade drew this on September 15th of 2010. So Wade is a master of all arts. And this is actually art I used in my magazine interview with Wade 5 years ago. That was printed in hard copy. There will be a link in the show notes. Now also it says music player. Now these are all features that were not in the Apple II version. There is a music player with 7 tracks. You can buy them separately on Bandcamp, I believe. Now I'm going to be playing some of this music later, but it does not follow the action of the game like most video games. It is just like listening to an iTunes playlist while playing the game. So it's not like you walk into the chapel, for example, and suddenly it starts playing the chapel. So let's escape out of there. You can save your game, restore a game, read the credits, etc. Now I am going to be playing this game for IndieSider, and I'm going to make a few modifications to how it's presented. First of all, I'm going to zoom in on the text so it's a lot easier to read, and I'm going to put the auto map in the upper right hand corner. So those are the only 2 features you'll be seeing, but that's not how the game typically looks as you've seen these first 5 minutes. I'm also going to be playing the soundtrack in the background. So that just gives you a better sense of all the things that the game has to offer while making it appropriate to YouTube. So with all that in mind, as I said, I'm not going to focus on the same questions I asked Wade 5 years ago about what was your inspiration to write this game and how did people perceive it when it released for the Apple II, etc. I want to focus more on what changes he made, and especially coming out as a commercial product, porting it to Inform, releasing on itch.io, adding the music player, and the like. As always, if you want to find the audio version of this podcast, you can find it at IndieSider.net. There's also a link in the show notes. So if you want to listen to Wade Clarke without watching me play the text adventure, which granted may not be the most visual game to play on YouTube, you can just go ahead and download the MP3 of the interview to your podcatcher of choice like iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn, or Overcast, or Instacast, or Pocket Cast, and listen to it there. So with all that said, let's go to the interview with Mr. Clarke. Joining me on the line today, all the way from Australia, 14,000 miles away from my home in Boston, is Mr. Wade Clarke, developer of Leadlight. Hello, Wade.
Hi, Ken. How are you?
Good. How are you, sir?
I'm very well.
Now, you and I have known each other for about half a decade in various media, but this is actually the first time we have spoken.
Yeah, it's just me listening to your podcasts and occasionally watching you online and stuff, and otherwise we've communicated via email. So yeah, it's funny to suddenly get to the talking part like this.
Leadlight Gamma just came out in 2015, and it is an adaptation of the original Leadlight, which came out 5 years ago. So have you been working on this adaptation for 5 years?
No, I think I might have put in the first, I might have just started to play with it a couple of years ago. Basically, it happened because I program new text adventures with this programming language called Inform. And one night, sort of just for fun, I sat down to type in some of the locations from the original Leadlight, because the original, I had to program stuff for months before I could even turn it on and see what the first room was like. That was sort of how primitive the tools I was using. Here in Inform, I could literally just type the room description and type go, and I was there with a cursor, and it was like already a bit of a simulation of the game. And it was just because I enjoyed that experience enough of walking around in it again that I basically I like the world of that game, and if you suddenly decide that you're going to remake a whole game rather than make a new one, and that's a big time commitment, you must like your own game in this case, which I did. So that's how I got the ball rolling. I suddenly decided, well, I want to turn this bunch of descriptions I've typed in into the game in a new incarnation.
So you had a few years off between the development of Leadlight and the development of Leadlight Gamma. What was it like to revisit a game you'd written years ago?
Well, because this game, I've spent a lot of, I guess because of the complexities of making the original, it was something it's a game where a lot of it is burned into me anyway. I think to make, perhaps, if you made a similar game using new tools, you wouldn't have to spend as much time with it. You wouldn't be sort of tweaking the programming at a really nuts and bolts level like I was in Apple II Basic and assembly language, and that forced me to become incredibly familiar with it in a way that I might not be with a game that I make with newer tools and takes less long to make. So it was still pretty live in my mind, and then I'd spent time like talking about it, and it had been reviewed and stuff afterwards. Yeah, so it was, for me, it was still sort of fresh in my head, even though it was a fair while later.
Is this the first game you've released in form?
This would be the third. The first one I released was a game about a birthday party, 6-year-olds having a birthday party, and it was called Six. And then the second one was a little game I did for a competition called Ectocomp. That is a competition within interactive fiction communities where you sort of make a Halloween-themed game. And that was called Ghosterington Night. And then, so Leadlight Gamma is the third one, that I've made with Inform.
After creating those two original adventures, why did you choose to revisit a game you'd already made as opposed to making a third original adventure?
Yeah, well, I'd been thinking about doing a sequel to Leadlight just using Inform. And then because of that little experience I had one night where I typed in some locations from the first one, it just became an idea that grew into my head because it was just something I liked. I wanted to walk around in the first game again in some fashion.
One of the complaints about the original Leadlight was its inaccessibility not in gameplay terms, but in technical terms, because it was written for the Apple II. However, in my opinion, a lot of that complaint is addressed by the fact that it can be played in any web browser via the ActiveGS emulator. So, given that most people can access the original version of the game if they wanted to, what advantages did you see to porting it to the more common platform of Inform?
Yeah, well, I suppose ultimately I had to view it as an exercise in getting the game to more people. And as you say, it's already available. If you can either download an Apple II emulator and put the images in it from the original game, or you could go to my website and play it with this ActiveGS thing, which is like an emulator in a browser of an Apple II running Leadlight. But in spite of all that, there's still, in the current context of gaming, I find people are less willing to do these things in general. And even in the interactive fiction community, where there's this paradigm that's developed of the games are kind of these portable files and then you put them in these things called interpreters and it runs the game. But that's already a step between some player, they see, oh, I want to play this game, and then they have to read an instruction that says, okay, now you have to go and download this thing, and they go, oh, okay, they do that, and then they get the game, then they've got to learn how to play the game, and there's the historical argument about that the parser is sort of a inherently difficult thing to learn or to understand for some people. I guess the people are presented with a prompt and a question mark, and there's this argument that they think they can type anything and that it should be understood, and that's not really how it works. But I don't know. I mean, in my sincere opinion is that none of these things are as difficult as they seem, and yet they're still hurdles to jump over. In the age when you've got Steam and you download the game, you turn it on, and in theory it works. I mean, in 2 for 2 samples of the 2 games I downloaded on Steam, both had incredible technical problems, but I won't bore you with my sufferings. Basically, yeah, it's still a hurdle. And with the ActiveGS thing, they had to download the emulator plugin first, and that's technology that's already starting to get out of sync, I think. I think it doesn't work in Chrome anymore. And also, once they get into the game in the Apple II environment, even people who play interactive fiction a lot, they've got these set ideas about what things work or don't work, and there are particular commands they know, and some people tried those and they didn't work, and they went, oh, this isn't operating how I like, and they're quicker to turn on it for that reason. Now, this was also in the context of the interactive fiction competition, which is where the game first appeared, it's hard to say. There are some people there who are really sort of reaching out to each game and trying new things, and there's also, understandably, people have to get through 30 to 40 games, so they're quick to find reasons to not like something. So, you know, some guy typed in, you know, he didn't like that it didn't have a restart command. I think you had to type quit. I didn't have memory to stick in the word restart as well. I mean, I was playing with individual bytes in this thing. And to repeat a command, I had said in the manual, I'm big on, you know, reading the effing manual, to hit return to repeat your command. But somebody typed a G, which is the typical interactive fiction way of doing it, and it didn't repeat their command, and they were angry about that. So there were both external factors to do with setting up the software, the emulator. Then once they got into the Apple II world, it was also sort of operating technically in different ways to what they would expect, and also an unusual combination of elements in the game, that is puzzles and sort of random combat, and being set in the modern world, even though it was coming at them by this 8-bit, you know, screen. So I think, yeah, there was a lot of kind of confusion about how to make sense of this game for some people.
Some of the complaints you outlined were levied against you by judges in competitions. Given that Leadlight has already been entered into competitions, is Leadlight Gamma eligible to be an entrant in these competitions?
I think not. I think I read recently just in some discussion about at least for I mean, they have the interactive fiction people have the Academy Awards of Interactive Fiction, which is called the XYZZYs or the Zizzies or something. And I don't think it's eligible for that, because it counts as an incarnation of a game that has previously come out, and they're focused on new stuff. But I mean, it may be eligible for something else somewhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. So since you were porting this game and you were making these updates and these changes to the interface, for example, you had the opportunity to make other changes, such as to the gameplay, to the layout, to the puzzles. Mm-hmm. What did you decide what to change versus what to keep?
Yeah, that was a big part of the whole project, deciding what to change, what to leave as is. I suppose I started off with the idea that it would be completely faithful. That is, you know, if you started off with just a verbatim thing of the game running in another language, that's what it was going to be. But then, obviously, I began to think about it, and I thought, well, there's things that I can add that make it more attractive and accessible without being something that wasn't really available to the person who had the original game. That is to say, most people make, you know, if they're playing a game like this which needs a map, they can either do it in their head or they make one. So, well, I've just helped by adding a map on the side of the screen. It doesn't show you anything any place you haven't been, you know, it just makes the map for you as you walk around. The colour changing features that were on the Apple IIgs version, I reproduced them in the screen border and on the map background. So if an enemy finds you and you need to hide, the screen turns red. There are various other colour changes depending for the, you know, just minor things like when you're saving a game or restoring, or if you die, and I guess I didn't want to change any of the numeric mechanics behind the game. I basically wanted it to be that if you played a game on the Apple II version, that in the turn count and all the die rolls behind the scenes, that would all be identical to in the new version. So if anybody says, well, I beat the old version, if you beat the new version, you're as good as them, or vice versa, you know. The two versions are comparable in gameplay. It is the same combat percentages and stuff like that. And I haven't altered the pros, except where I've altered the pros in both games. So for instance, you know, if there was an improvement I could make, but I went back to the Apple II version and tried to make it there and there wasn't room or it didn't fit on the screen, I didn't allow myself to add it to the new one. So the two are actually in sync again. If you download the Apple II version for free now and tried it, you'd find the pros and all that is the same as in the new one.
There are two features in particular I'm curious about. One is the soundtrack, because I read one of the reviews of Leadlight Gamma, and this author's he was glad to have the music, but he was disappointed that it didn't sync with the gameplay. It was more like it was running separately from what was happening on the screen. Why did you choose to implement it that way?
Yeah, that was a fair call by him, but it's funny. What happened was originally there wasn't going to be any music. That was kind of a thing that just happened. You know, I had a track. I made a title sting, and that was going to be it. But then I thought, I could make, you know, more tracks related to this, and I did. And they were sort of, visualized isn't a good word for music, but I saw them as feelies in the old sense of the thing where you used to buy a game from Infocom and it would have props in the box. You know, like the Wishbringer had a toy stone in it, or it might have had a fake magazine or something. You know, documents that, and they actually helped you play the game. Sometimes they were copy protection as well. But there's a tradition of having sort of these external things that are external to the game, that come with the game. Now, in the current age, there's one guy online in particular, Sam Cabo Ashwell. I've never said his name before, so I hope I pronounced it right. He was suggested that feelies, in this day and age, you could basically attach the feelies to the game file. He sort of said, well, if you can, why not? You know, why make people download more other stuff? And so that was kind of what was on my mind. I was thinking, oh, well, I've made this music. I was thinking of just having it separately, but I have the technology to stick it in the game, to attach it to the game. Why don't I? I've got an image gallery in there as well. So that's how it came about. And then kind of, I suppose I thought people have to be able to play it. So then I wrote the music player, and then it's starting to look a bit more accessible or a bit more integrated, but it's not really. It was basically designed as something you could listen to outside the game, but if you want, I've set it up so you can listen to it inside the game. So apparently that, you know, for that the reviewer on Adventure Gamer.com, that didn't work, and I can see his point. I haven't thought about it that, you know, from that perspective before. It's sort of the first time I've tried it, really.
And what about the Minimap feature? That seems like something that, for technical reasons, you could not have implemented on the Apple II, where you were dealing with bytes, but being able to technically implement it also has an impact on the playability, because in a way, it's making the game easier. So was this something you implemented because you were able to, or because you are targeting an audience that may not be as experienced or adept at text adventures and may need that assistance?
No, I basically did it because I was able to. I think the thing, in my mind, the thing that helps new players the most is the tutorial mode, which is completely hands-on. It says, okay, here's what to do, here's how this works. It introduces you to the commands in a certain order and then says, okay, now you're ready to go. To me, that's the main thing that helps new players. I mean, obviously the map probably also helps, but I guess there's also a tradition of people knowing they have to map stuff in these games. If I'm selling it to people who don't know they have to map stuff, well, now they don't. They've got the graphic thing beside them. And I just think it is also a visually attractive element as well. That it just, yeah, I mean, it's good on the screenshots. It makes it look cooler than just a page of text. So, yeah, I mostly did it because I could.
No, that's just as good a reason as any.
Yep.
Now, one of the other changes you made was that the original game was freeware. This one is commercial. Why make that change?
Well, A, I wanted to make some money. B, probably because there is an increasing sense that we should be, in the interactive fiction community, we should be valuing our games more, perhaps. I mean, the interactive fiction that was written after what people have called the commercial period, which was like in the 80s and early 90s, and then it sort of stopped, and then there was this community that kept writing these games. They just did it because they liked it, they did it for each other, and so they weren't selling them. And so because they are sort of the seeds of the community, the idea of selling it is never, you know, I guess it's never been writ large on people's minds in that community. And maybe we're just getting used to the idea again, given that indie gaming per se has sort of gone gangbusters, you know, and people have made it outrageously easy to sell your games now. You can go on itch.io, like I have with Leadlight. It's harder to get on Steam, but you can do it. There are all these venues for dispensing your games, and that's made it easy enough that I thought I should just do that. I wanted to start and also adding, you know, saying it is worth something. And what it is worth is $1 less than Andrew Plotkin's game, because his game was brand new and he charged $5 for it. So I subtracted $1 and just said, all right, here's Leadlight Gamma for $4.
That's Hadean Lands you're referring to?
That's right, yep.
Yes, I backed that on Kickstarter, full disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you said that you wanted to make a little bit of money on this. How would you define the success of Leadlight Gamma? Is it in positive reviews? Is it in player feedback? Is it in your bank account?
For me, my habit has always been that, I mean, the artistic things I've made have usually not made money. They usually cost more money to make than they make. And I mean, the way I structure my life is I like to have a sort of a part-time job or something that's giving me structure and that is separate to creative work, and then do creative work around that. And in that scheme, it's not terribly worrying to me if these things don't make money. So, I mean, now it's nice to have some money. I mean, it's not making a tremendous amount. You know, I can say it's made more than any other text adventure I've written because I didn't charge anything for them. What was the question?
So this is your first commercial game?
Yes, it is, actually. Yeah.
Excellent. The main question was, what would have to happen for you to consider Leadlight Gamma a success?
Oh, yeah, right, yeah. So for me, I do like positive reviews and stuff, or, you know, or interesting reviews that show that people perceive what I, you know, something that I put in or something that I hadn't even thought of. I mean, it's especially, I get that sense from, I also produce electronic music, and it's quite, I think, by most people's standards, sort of difficult. And so there, when I get a review that says that is from somebody who can perceive what I'm going for, you know, that's very gratifying. So yeah, when I just seeing reviews and seeing people mention it and play it and that they liked it and stuff, that is probably the, you know, one of the main things that sustains me. Yeah.
How did you come up with the name Leadlight Gamma? Because for most games that are being revisited or upgraded, I would expect to see a name like Leadlight 1.1, Leadlight XL, Super Leadlight, Leadlight HD.
Leadlight Director's Cut.
That's an excellent one, especially given the cinematic inspirations for the game. I've never seen a game with the gamma suffix. So how did you come up with that?
Yeah, well, I was thinking, you know, okay, in the beginning, it's got to have, all right, number one practical consideration is I want it to have a separate name from just being called Leadlight again, so that it's, you know, shows up as a separate entity online. But then, as you ask, why not call it the Director's Cut or whatever? I guess, I don't know, I think it's, well, I guess I have a bit of a beef with the term Director's Cut, or in general, the move to resell games using these funny little titles, like you stick down the title, then you put a colon, then you put some other words after it, and suddenly you can charge people for it again. And sometimes I don't think people have been justified in the charging, or the words they've put down have been silly or thoughtless. I mean, Director's Cut is becoming a very abused term, especially if your perspective is like a bit of a cinema snob like me. You know, originally it was because there was an issue with studios stopping people interfering with the way the director wanted the film to be, and then later on the director got some kudos or power or something and they edited it to how they thought it should have been. But now people are just slapping the words Director's Cut on anything that's you know, we added some graphics or a few new rooms. It kind of cheapens the term Director's Cut. So in general, I haven't been a fan of those things. Oh, maybe it's one of those things where you've got a different standard for what you play and for what you do yourself. I mean, I quite enjoy a lot of survival horror games that have those silly titles on them, but the reason I called it Leadlight Gamma was Gamma is the Greek letter for G, and the G in this case is for the format of the game is glulks. Never had to pronounce that aloud before either. This is the format Andrew Plotkin helped or entirely created for dispensing interactive fiction games anew. And so because it's in that format, it's Gamma, it's G for glulks. It's also because it was a kind of an evocative thing. When I look at the title picture, which is black and white, it makes me think of X-rays, and then X-rays are gamma rays. That's another thing. Yeah, so I guess that is the reason. I sort of found it to be an interesting take on some ideas I had floating around in my head.
It's not because you finally implemented the G command to repeat the previous command?
I can barely remember if I did now. I put in the thing where you hit return, but secretly behind the scenes what it's doing is typing G. Well, you just can't see that.
Now, you founded the name Heiress Software to launch Leadlight Gamma. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I had a feeling that I had at least sort of 3 game ideas in my head that I really wanted to do. You know, like, I think it's unlikely I'll switch to other game genres or whatever at the moment. I want to keep doing interactive fiction games. And so because I've got a few concrete ideas that I want to do, I thought, well, I'll tie them together. You know, I'll finally put them under the banner so they've got some kind of imprimatur or auspices or whatever you like. Yeah, so I've got 2 other game ideas, and I'll also release them under Heiress Software, and there's enough of an aesthetic connection that it will work. For instance, my game 6 about the little kids, I've tried to keep that separate from Leadlight because there's no crossover at all. I mean, apart from I created them both, so I'm in them both. But you know, one is a game about kids and it's G-rated and everything, and I don't sort of, you don't want that necessarily sitting side by side on a website with this other game about schoolgirls cutting each other apart with pre-technological weapons. So that's why, by putting these other three under Heiress Software, it will say, all right, they're all kind of adult games, they've all got something in common, and maybe 6 doesn't have that in common, and Ghost Rington Night doesn't have that in common.
Can you tell us about those 2 other games that you have in the works?
Yeah, well, one is, there's a couple of science fiction, interactive fiction games called, what's the first one? Andromeda Awakening by Marco Innocenti. And then he made a sequel to that called Andromeda Apocalypse, which won the interactive fiction competition a year or 2 later. And he then made a competition within the community to produce games in the same universe. And so there have since been, I think, is it 4 other games? It must be 4, because there'd be at least, the competitions run twice, and there've been 2 entries each time. And a terrific one of those in the first competition was called Andromeda Dreaming. But anyway, so that means there's 4 or 5 games in this universe already, and I thought I would like to join in and make a sci-fi game in that universe. So that's one of the games. The other one is this incredibly difficult idea, because I haven't worked out how to do it yet, and I'm thinking about it, and it will be the next one I try to do if I can work it out. But it involves extreme criminality and serial killing and some quite sort of extreme violence and really damaged people in it. And the difficulty of that is it's very hard to put players in the shoes of people who are, committing sexually violent murders or whatever for very understandable reasons. They don't want to feel they're responsible for those actions. It's something you can read about in a novel or see in a film and sort of be outside of it. So for me, it's kind of a challenge. I've been trying to work out how do you deal with kind of more dysfunctional characters in a way where people, I don't even know if the phrase want to spend time with them is correct, but can I even get some kind of interaction out of it that will be meaningful and not make people feel disgusted or, it can't be a pointless exercise. Somebody might think it's a political act to make a game where you play a serial killer and that's just a test of whether you want to type things like, kill blah, 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 which to me isn't revealing anything. I mean, I want to make a decent game and it's subject material that interests me, but because of these difficulties of how disturbing the subject matter is and how it's difficult to deal with these kinds of characters in interactive fiction, I don't know how the hell I'm going to do it. And I just walk around each day, at some thinking of ideas of how to solve these problems.
Given that it is such a difficult and mature topic, why is it one that interests you?
I'm very interested in psychology, and I guess I'm interested in the psychology of people who really go the wrong way as well, because they actually tend to show up some of the strengths of the human mind, or not the strengths, the capability of the mind to form, to create behaviour, to develop a pattern of thinking that. So how does a person get to a point where they think the solution to their problems is to kill people? That is the point that someone has reached when they're serial killing. They tend to be doing this, for power reasons. They don't relate to other people. This is sort of all they understand. And I'm interested in the whole broad area of of neuroplasticity and both positive thinking and cognitive behavioural therapy, which I've had for my own anxiety and depression. And then other ways where people kind of hard bake their brains the wrong way. So that's part of it. And I guess I like horror material a lot as well. I've liked horror things all my life. And so an inevitable part of that is it sort of falls over into this murder category. And yeah, so I do look at and watch and read a lot of sort of grisly stuff. But I'm also very interested in the psychology of it. So that's kind of trying to explore those two things at once.
You are truly a Renaissance man. So do you have any ETA for those 2 other games?
No. Because I think the sci-fi one, I'm really confident about that. I think I'll do a good job, and when I begin it, it'll take a finite amount of time. But because the other one is sort of my inverted commas baby that I'm really interested in, I'm putting it first. So, and I really don't know how long it'll take me to work all that out. But so I'll keep at it, and sooner rather than later, I hope. my guess would be a couple of years to get that first one out.
Okay, and I want to close with one more question, which could be a big question. We could probably do a whole podcast about this, but I'll give you a time limit. Why make a text adventure at all in 2015? We have these powerful new consoles like the PlayStation 4 with HD graphics, and granted that level of development may not be accessible to a one-person indie, but still, text adventures by some people are perceived as a medium that we moved beyond 30 years ago. So why create something in this genre in this day and age?
I guess, first, my personal skill in it is that it remains a very sort of viable and interesting format. It's just another type of game rather than I don't think of it as a game that is without graphics or something. A graphic game is a game without text and a parser as well, by the same sort of paradoxical thought. And I forget who it was, somebody in interactive fiction, I think he said, well, nobody complains that chess doesn't have graphics and they still think that's pretty good. I personally am not crazy about chess because robots can play it, but again, we put my prejudices aside. But so I think in itself it is a viable and interesting form, but at the moment there's actually tons of stuff going on with it that's not even to do with parser games. There's this tool called Twine that has made it very easy for people to make text-based games. They're essentially choice and link-based ones. Yeah, there's kind of been an explosion in that area. I mean, a few years ago on the interactive fiction database, what you would see on a day-to-day basis was another parser game would appear every few days or every few weeks or something. Now, basically every day, every week, what you mostly see are new Twine games and also other sort of choice-based things. Like there's a company called Choice of Games that every game title begins with the prefix choice of. I'm ashamed I've only thought of the example choice of zombies, choice of romance, choice of this, choice of that. And they're commercial and they seem to be doing very well. So there's sort of lots of areas that have been taking off for text-based games. Now, they haven't really been... I don't know that parser games haven't necessarily been getting more exposure or less exposure, but I sort of feel that the game market is big enough now that whatever kind of game you've got, you can stick it on a site, and if it's got a good blurb or something, somebody will try it. So it's not like... I think the people, like younger gamers coming through now, they're even beyond the point that they don't even know that a text adventure was an old thing. They just see a new curiosity that they might want to try. That's what I think.
Excellent. So thank you so much for talking about Leadlight Gamma. Remind us where we can find the game, your work online, on Twitter, anywhere?
My website is wadeclarke.com, and that sort of links to everything else I do, so that makes my stuff quite easy to find. I've got my site for heiresssoftware.com. That's Heiress Software is one word, and that in turn links to Leadlight Gamma. The Leadlight Gamma has its own site on Heiress, so it's like leadlightgamma.heiresssoftware.com, and it's also on itch.io is where you can buy it. And that link is probably too fiddly to recall, but it's all easy to find anyway. You can type in Leadlight Gamma, or you can type in Wade Clarke, and I think I'm blessed at this point that my site is the #1 hit.
Excellent, and we'll have links to all those in the show notes, so anybody who wants to find Wade or Leadlight Gamma can just go to IndieSider.net, and there will be links there. Wade, thank you so much for chatting with us. We appreciate your time.
Great, thanks a lot for having me.